Hey, everybody, welcome to What's Up Wednesday. For my address this week, or my thought, I'm going to cover a topic that I think is very controversial. And I want to preface it by saying that I'm not really issuing an opinion or a stance on this topic. I think that we can all relate to it just from watching the news on a daily basis. But the overall topic is really the divisiveness that we're dealing with in our society and how that affects us on a daily basis. And there are a couple of reasons I'm bringing this up. One, over the weekend, I saw in the news that there have been 169 what they categorize as mass shootings in the United States already this year. And that's an overwhelming and unbelievable number. But then again, even though I don't watch the news very often, every time I turn it on, it's shooting here, shooting there, murder here, murder there. So we're seeing it everywhere we go. And I think that some of the root cause of all of that is mental health and hatred both. But I've been reading a couple of books. I know I mentioned recently the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. And one of the things that Simon pointed to in his book was this change in approach by leaders through the 90s into the 2000s, and how it seemed like values began to change. And he talked about the banking industry specifically. He talked about Jack Welch and GE and, really putting the shareholders before the employees, and just continued to talk a little bit about how decision-making changed along with changes in values. He also touched on the introduction of social media, which I think is very prevalent today. I finished that book, very enlightening book. I recommend people read it. I started a book called Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown. And Brene Brown's somebody who has a lot of short videos on LinkedIn. And, I find her stuff interesting. Not everybody can relate to Brene Brown. You may or may not like her, but I do like some of what she has to say. I feel like she has been tormented by her inner voice from how she grew up. And I think she's an academic and a scholar, and I think that she's got some really interesting views. But what she said in this book that really stood out to me is it's not easy to hate people close up. And when I think of that and I look at it, something that stands out to me is the way that people behave driving down the road. You put a piece of glass between somebody and other people, and they have unbelievable courage. Now you take that glass away and put them in a grocery store walking down the hall in the building, and they're very much less likely to get as emotional and as aggressive as they are when they're upset by something that somebody did on the road. Hopefully you can relate to that. I'm sure everybody's dealt with it. But I think that what Brene says makes a lot of sense, because we all have different views, political views, opinions, religious views. We may have different values. And the fact is that we're all probably more different than we are alike. And it's really easy to focus on those differences, such as political affiliation. Somebody is a left Democrat, somebody is a right Republican. And just because they're different sides of the party doesn't mean that they need to be enemies. It doesn't mean that there needs to be divisiveness. If anything, it's amazing how if you get those two people close up, they find commonalities, and that divisiveness can go away. Yeah, they may not agree with each other's political affiliation, but guess what? They realize that each person's human and they have good qualities, and they can find a reason to relate with those people. So I really like what Brene says. It's not easy to hate people close up. Instead of getting angry and turning towards this divisiveness that we categorized as hate, which I think is so incredibly prevalent in our industry right now, zeroing in, honing in, dialing in, getting to know people close up, I think it can really change the view. And I know that all of us probably are aware of this, but I think that creating a conscious awareness and focusing on it, and maybe using that as a leading driver, can do a lot of good in our world. If there's any one thing we can control, it's what we do, and we can set the example that we want others to see. So I challenge everybody to think about that. Hopefully there's some value, and we'll see you next Wednesday.